Welcome to the Entrepreneurs Organization Indonesia podcast. My name is Erik and in this podcast I interview speakers and entrepreneurs to understand what makes them tick. For more information about the Entrepreneurs Organization, go to eonetwork.org, and for show notes on this episode, go to eopodcast.org. Serge Romano, Italian by blood, Australian by nationality, is a sales coach, teaching teams and companies how to improve their sales process, sales management and salespeople by applying something called the Sales Playbook. As Serge explains, sales is usually the lifeblood of any company, but the least structured and managed process. His Sales Playbook solves all of this. Serge is a fanatic fan of Australian rules football and has been involved with this sport at many levels. He explains how this has shaped his thinking and his teachings. Serge is the first guest that really choked me up when he shared his very personal story on how he managed to overcome anxiety attacks when he was in a critical period in his life. Since speaking to Serge, I have shared his story to friends, and it turns out that many others have used his particular method successfully to fight their own demons. Meet Serge Romano, a wonderful storyteller, sales coach, sportsman who will also explain why it's actually not a crime not to have a passion. Hello, Serge.
Hello, Erik. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm sitting down with Serge Romano today after yesterday having a very inspiring presentation and workshop with you for the Entrepreneurs Organization in Indonesia. And you were so kind to grant me a bit of time to speak to you a bit more. I'm very happy that we have the time to sit down.
Looking forward to this, Erik. It's always nice to speak to people that, and obviously with what happened yesterday, always nice to follow up with thoughts and ideas. But I really enjoyed yesterday, so looking forward to having a chat with you now.
Yeah, cool. So let's start with maybe a bit about your background. You know, where did you grow up, and what was your corporate career like? Could you tell a little bit about your story about it?
Sure. So, born and bred in Melbourne, Australia, and still live there today. And I'm sure that I'll have many people that would like to debate this, but I believe it is, pretty much one of the best cities in the world. So born and bred there. My parents, however, are of Italian origin, and they came out to Australia in 1955. And I was born in Australia, but I have two older brothers, and they were both born in Italy. So parents came out and migrated out here for a better life, of course, as most people do, and especially back then with people from Italy and Greece and Malta in particular. So grew up in Melbourne, and all my schooling and college, etc., happened there. Then from a corporate perspective, after I went through uni, I actually started working with one of my brothers in the video industry, and started working there. And then I got a job with an organisation who were distributing Paramount and Universal Pictures to the video marketplace back in the days when you actually had a cassette.
Right.
And I was a sales rep for that organisation for a little while, and then became the sales manager for that particular organisation. And then whilst all that was happening, my brother Tony started an organisation called Movieland, which is a video store, if you like, and he started the concept of franchising those stores back in 1985. And I then joined him in 1989, and together we started to grow and build that business up with another partner as well, and got to about 145 stores Australia-wide. Back in 2000, sold the business to a company called EOID01, who were also, funnily enough and ironically enough, I met a couple of people yesterday that they were involved in EOID01 here. So I sold the business, and my brother Tony stayed on, and then I kind of skewed from that altogether, and had a conversation with a colleague of mine in the Franchise Council of Australia, and I was very passionate about franchising. And they asked me if I'd had any inkling of wanting to go and do some work with a company called Mortgage Choice, who were building their franchise model. So at the time I said, well, I know nothing about mortgages, I should say, but other than I had one. And they said, no, well, they'd like you to work with them if that's okay. I said, great, let's do it. So worked with them for a couple of years, then was asked to go across to a company called Rams Home Loans, same thing, and then finally started working with a company in Australia as the biggest bank in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank, and was working with a couple of people there in developing the self-employed license model, if you like, called Mortgage Innovation, and did that for approximately 6 years. And during that time, met a very inspirational guy myself, and hence leading us to where I am today. And that gentleman's name is Jack Daly. Mm-hmm. And Jack is obviously a very well-known speaker on the world circuit from a point of view of sales and sales coaching. And he was doing a lot of work with the CBA, but not just with them, obviously. He was doing work right around the country and the world. So we got to talking one day, and he said, "Hey, you should be doing something else. you should be doing something like what I'm doing." And really, that was the inspiration for me. And it's a funny story, Erik, because let me tell you briefly. When I was at the bank, mm-hmm. I actually said, even though I was sort of working there in a consultancy fashion, I said, "Look, I really want to be kind of the Jack Daly of the bank and potentially of Australia." So that whole concept to me resonated immediately. I really wanted to help people get better at their sales and sales capabilities. And
was it the serving others part, or was it the image, or was it like the stardom, or what was attractive to you?
All of the above. But first and foremost, and so I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I mean, the whole concept of the what do you say, the stardom and also the
so basically, the fact that you're serving.
Serving was
serving.
That's number one for me. That's the key, right?
Okay.
Because I think everything else then follows that.
Right.
Because if you are genuinely sincere about helping people and serving people, I think things come back to you because of that. And whether you like the fact that there's stardom or you don't, that's going to come back to you because people respect what you do, love what you do, enhance what you do, and applaud what you do. So thankfully, I like that stuff, so that's okay.
It's a process, I think, also of you're sending a lot of positive energy out in the world, right? And that can only be answered by kindness and by other people coming into your life. Right?
And I love that,
Sure.
and I've been so fortunate to meet so many great people, and here I am, here's a guy from Melbourne, Australia, from Italian parents' heritage, sitting down in a hotel room with a gentleman from, in Indonesia who actually comes from the Netherlands, mm-hmm. doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I've decided to help people get better at sales. Ask me whether I was doing this 20 years ago.
Right.
That's what excites me about this.
Sorry, I was interrupting your story. You were saying you saw this as a role model, and as an inspiration. You wanted to be like that, in Australia.
Absolutely. So then started the process of learning a lot about the process and the system that Jack had, and he was instrumental in helping me put together a lot of that stuff together with another colleague of his in the States by the name of Dan Larson. And look, I think it took all of about 5 minutes for me to decide that this is what I wanted to do after I had that conversation. And and dare I say, the rest is history.
Right. And what is that exactly? You're teaching something called the Sales Playbook. We had a half-a-day introduction into that yesterday.
Yeah.
And it uses very powerful analogies from sports, from how you run businesses. But can you explain what a sales playbook is, and especially how does that help businesses flourish?
Sure. I guess the sales playbook is the end result of understanding what works well within an organisation's sales process and sales team, sales management, if you like. And the core focus of the whole sales playbook thing is, let's understand what best practice is. Now, there are so many organisations that have best practice, and they probably aren't even aware that they're saying or doing these things. But then what happens is it tends to lose its focus. It tends to lose its consistency and frequency because it's not documented. It's not kept as an ongoing facilitation for either existing salespeople and managers or new and incoming salespeople and managers. So that's why the sales playbook becomes a very important document, because people can then manage to that. It's going back to my franchising days, it's a system and a process that is followed. And we always talk about the number one franchising model in the world being McDonald's, etc. And that's true. But the fact of the matter is that the concept of the playbook is getting something that we know works, it's been proven that it works, so therefore let's replicate that and make sure everyone's doing it, number one. And secondly, we need to make sure that management believes in it and holds people accountable to it. That's the other key factor to the playbook.
Right. So could you tell me about what are the biggest challenges after you've created the system?
Yep.
To make sure that this organization, this fluid combination of people and, emotions, is actually executing the playbook? What are some of the challenges that companies have in the execution, and how do you coach them to do that better?
The biggest challenge is one thing, and that is the sales management of the book and the people.
Right.
So if you go up another level, if the owner and CEOs and managing directors of businesses do not buy into this concept, then obviously it's not going to flow down. Okay, so I'm going to assume for a moment that is the case, but it's not necessarily a safe assumption. Okay, at times, but the sales management role is pivotal to this working. So you talk about the biggest challenge. My biggest challenge is to make sure that the sales manager or managers or directors of sales own the concept of the playbook so that they then drive it and continue to drive it and make sure that, and Eric, let me put it to you this way. I often say to most organisations, I can help and teach salespeople be better at what they do all day long. And I can introduce a lot of these templates and tools and things to improve their performance. But if it's not measured, if it's not kept accountable, if it's not kept going on a consistent basis by upper level management, it is a waste of time and money for people. So that's the biggest challenge.
Right. Yeah, I really understand that. You have one other huge passion in your life. It's sports.
Yeah.
So could you tell a little bit about that passion and how you got involved with that? And then I would like you to link that back to what you're actually teaching, because yesterday I really felt that sports manager spirit inside the way that you're teaching and the way that you're also trying to implement this in a sales process.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, like I said, I was born in Melbourne, and for anyone listening to this podcast, they will know that if they know anything about Australia and Melbourne in particular, the most passionate sport that exists in that country is Australian rules football, or AFL as we know it. And I was brought up with that. I used to play football on the street, and even if I didn't have friends that could play with me at the time, I'd actually kick the ball to myself, and I'd actually commentate to myself as if I was on TV and kicking the ball and kicking goals and doing all that stuff. So from a very, very early age. And I then started to, at the age of 5, started to support a club called the Carlton Football Club. And to this day, very, very passionate about that club. I support it, I sponsor it, and I have been doing so for pretty much all my life. To the point where it actually affects my life if they lose, which is a very sad thing to admit, but it's true, Mondays are not pleasant for me if we lose, But I need to, overcome these tragedies, unfortunately, every now and again. But I've been very fortunate because the club has, in fact, been one of the most successful clubs in AFL history. The only problem is that probably for the last 10 or 15 years, it's actually been not that good because of a number of reasons. But anyway, that's another story. So not only did I love and am very passionate about the club, the game itself I've been very passionate about. And I was very fortunate. I have 3 kids. One is a boy. He's my middle boy. His name is Patrick. So obviously when he was born, that gave me a great if you like, to get involved with football at junior level. So I started to get involved with what's known as Auskick in Australia, so helping little kids develop their skills, etc. So I actually, together with another friend of mine, was running an Auskick clinic of about 120 kids, so loved it. Loved every minute of it. And obviously my son being there, and then from there we went on to coach him in underage football from about the age of under 12s right through to under 19s. So I've been involved with coaching junior football and even to a reasonably elite level in Victoria. Won a couple of premierships with them and helped develop and coach these kids, right? So tying all of that in right from an early age and understanding what happens at the most elite level of AFL football with my involvement in the Carlton Football Club and also being on the board of the Northern Blues, I saw with my own eyes what it takes to actually get someone into an environment, teach them, coach them, train them, get them to understand what it means to actually, first and foremost, be a part of this club, and then secondly, to execute a game strategy and a plan. And Jack Daly talks about this as well, often with, obviously NFL and, yes. NBA, etc., etc. So it all made sense to me because it was like, well, hang on a minute. Why is it that at professional sports level, these people take not, days or weeks to, get their strategy in place. They take months.
Yes.
Pre-seasons, like 6 months before they even go anywhere near a game of football. And yet, in a business environment, when it comes to sales people and sales managers for that matter, there is no legitimate, consistent induction training program that gets them in and ensures that they understand all those things that I just spoke about, culture, strategies, etc., and plans, and we just send them out into the marketplace and say good luck. And then we have a problem because we then sit here and go, why did they fail?
Right.
Well, they failed because we let them fail.
Yes. From
a business point of view. And I often talk about the fact that most sporting organisations are run better than most business organisations for that very reason, and focusing the attention wholly and solely on the sales aspect of things. So that's where the passion and the integration of the sports and sales business side of things gets woven together.
Yeah. Yeah, and you speak about that in a very consistent and inspiring way. And I was really caught by that yesterday, and I really, really like that. Now let's maybe take a step to another topic.
Sure.
And maybe go a little bit to Serge as a person.
Yep.
You spoke a little bit about, how you got inspired to get into this business. You're now a coach, a mentor, a speaker. You have a business that is helping companies succeed in sales strategies. Can you tell me a little bit about, at this stage in your life, how did you design your life and what is important to you, and how do you make your choices on where you spend your energy, your presence, your time? How do you do that?
And it's a great question. my where I spend my time are the things that matter most to me now. You know, when I was younger, and I'm sure that this is the case for most people at an early age. When you're younger, it's all about, you know, me, right? And, you know, footloose, fancy-free, not a care in the world. You do what you want, and then as you get older, and obviously from a point of view of family, as I said, I'm married. I have 3 children. You know, especially coming from an Italian background, Erik, family to me is the most important thing in the world. So a lot of the decisions that I make are based around the fact that I want to make sure that I spend as much time as I can with my wife and my kids. And needless to say that sometimes they don't want to spend as much time with me because they're too busy doing their own thing, right? But that's fine. I get that. And the business that I have at the moment, I made a conscious decision to say, my lifestyle is something that I want to be in a lot more control of. And what I meant by that was I want to be able to do something that I'm really, really passionate about. And the reason that I want to do that and the end result of that is so that I can spend more time and energy with my family. And that was the thinking behind doing what I'm doing, as well as the passion that I have to help people.
Right. So could you break that down for us a bit more practical?
Sure.
Meaning, like in a week, right?
Yep.
How do you manage your time, like in a day? Do you work from home? Do you do a lot on Skype? Do you have an office? Do you go there? Do you have a team? So how, in a day, you know, how do you in a day or a week? Yeah. How do you make that happen for you?
Yeah, sure. So the business itself is structured in a manner where if I'm doing some work with organisations based on the fact that we might be doing a 6-month program, I actually do a good 70% of that work online, whether it's through GoToMeeting, Skype, whatever the case may be. You asked me, do I have an office? Yes, I do, and I have a clear strategy on that. People say, why don't you just work from home? I've never been a home office person, and it's not because I don't have the room or I don't have the facilities. I'm a person that believes that I like to separate work from home. Okay, so I literally have an office 5 minutes away.
Right.
And it's a serviced office. It's a nice little environment. I can go there. I can do work. I'll talk about my people that help me as well in a moment. But I work from an office. But the majority of the time, as you can appreciate, is either online with people doing, you know, the coaching and the training, or in fact face to face. And it is a bit of a dilemma, I must admit, Erik, because I've done a lot of surveying and I do a lot of stuff online, but every time I do the surveys, I say to people, how can I do this better for you? And they say, we love what you do, it's great, we want to see you more. So, and I don't know whether that's my fault or not, but I can only assume it is because I'm the only one responsible. And that is that the engagement that I obviously get with people when I'm live is a lot different to when I'm doing it online. So you talk about the scalability of a business. That in essence is my biggest challenge. I need to get, you know, another 50 Serge Romanos. That's not going to happen. Can I get people that are close enough, sort of the same? Who knows? Maybe I'll find people that are better. But my biggest challenge right now, as I scale up the business, is to get coaches on board, which I've got a couple already, to basically do what I do. But again, getting back to my scenario, on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, I work from the office or I'm at the premises of a client face-to-face. And a lot of that is done predominantly between the hours of 8 in the morning to about 6 p.m. of an evening. And I have learnt, especially since I have started this business, to shut off pretty much out of those times.
Okay.
There are exceptions to the rule, of course, and if I'm travelling and all that makes, that's obvious. But when I get home, by and large, I shut off from my business, and I spend time with my kids or my wife or my dog. I love my house, my garden. I do stuff around, that sort of thing. I will sit and watch all things AFL because I'm, got to catch up. What's going on there? If I've got board meetings at the Northern Blues, I'll go and do that. So there is another life, if you like, once I finish that last seminar or that last coaching assignment or that last training assignment, that's it.
I feel a very strong presence when I'm talking to you. This is very obvious when you're speaking in public, but even now when we're one-on-one, you have a very strong presence, and that makes people engaged with you. It makes me engaged with you. So do you, once you stop the working part, do you do something to clear and to be then present for your family and for your spouse? And are you in the same way with them as you are with clients and you are with me?
That's a great... You've got a lot of great questions today, Erik. I just want to let you know that.
Thank you very much.
My wife and I have this discussion often. And she says, do you think that you're a different person outside of the home? Look, the reality is yes, because I do, whilst it's genuine, and I can sit here hand on heart telling you that when I'm engaged with people in a working environment, it is what you see is what you get, right? At home, there's a release. It's almost like, you know what, I don't have to be on stage. I don't have to perform. I don't have to do all those things. And I love the fact that I don't have to do that, because the other four people in that house, they know me for who I am. And, we can laugh and we can... Sometimes, Erik, I come home and I don't want to talk to anybody because that's just... It's been a big day, or I've spoken to people all day long, and the last thing I want to do is speak to people, And they all understand that. And that's why, from a family perspective, I'm very, very lucky. Very lucky.
Has your family seen you speak on stage?
My wife has. Yeah. My wife has seen me speak on stage. I'll tell you something else in a moment.
What do you think about that?
Well, maybe you should ask her that, but I can only assume, and she has told me that she thought it was, pretty sensational. So, cool. But she's probably meant to say that, isn't she? She is.
But I could imagine the first time she sees you on stage, it could be a bit of a shock because I understand what you're doing, because in a setting like that, you need to radiate energy into the room to get it back, right? So you need to be maybe a bit more enthusiastic than you normally would be. But it could be quite of a shock. I mean, I know for sure that if my wife would see me talk in a group, she would be amazed as well, because I would be different. I know. Yep. Because I sort of do what you do. I go really all out if I speak to people. Well, but I was interested to hear what she would think about.
She was... well, and as a matter of fact, one of my recent trips to Malaysia, Kathy came with me, and she was actually in the room for about the last 2 or 3 hours of my session with one of my clients. And, they were thoroughly engaged. They couldn't, everything was going like amazingly well. And my wife was just sitting there listening and watching what was going on. And she said, I just can't believe how they are just so engaged with what you're saying. It's like they're hanging on every word. And I said, you know what? I don't make that up. This is what it is. And I just communicate it.
So, bit of a cheeky question maybe, but how do you sell this business life that you have to your family? So how do they accept, support, and be engaged and love what you do as much as you love what you do? How have you sold that to them?
The concept of selling what I do to them is very easy, Erik. It's called they have a very nice lifestyle.
Okay.
And I'm, a little tongue-in-cheek there. But at the end of the day, they appreciate the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing. They have been very fortunate. And let me put my wife aside here for a moment. My kids have been very fortunate, and they know that, and they are respectful children, and I love them dearly. And they know that throughout my entire business life, I've actually been very fortunate with my work life. I've worked for businesses, I've had a business, and don't get me wrong, it hasn't been smooth sailing all the way, but I've loved everything that I've done, and I've been very fortunate in the things that I've done, and I've been reasonably successful, obviously, in all the things that I've done. So from that point of view, they have not wanted for anything, is my point. So in their mind, I don't have to really sell anything about this to them. It's like, Dad's doing what he's doing. He's really, really good at it. We really, really respect him for that. And these are not my words. They've actually said this to me, and I'm very appreciative of that. So I haven't had to do much selling, to be honest with you.
How important is money in your life?
It's important. Absolutely, it's important. However, let me tell you a little bit more about my wife, Kathy.
Please do.
Kathy is a very grounded person. She keeps me grounded. I'm in the past have been I'm going to take over the world guy. And Kathy's going, that's good, but
let's start with Australia.
We're here. This is where we are. And not only that, metaphorically speaking, it's a case of, you know what, Serge, just be, this is her famous line, be grateful for what you have. And she says that to me all the time. And I do. I take a deep breath at times, and I take stock, and you go, you know what? How fortunate am I? How lucky am I with family, with kids, and all that stuff? And so, having said that, is money important to get the things that we would like? Absolutely it is. We had a very brief discussion prior to starting this, and you were talking about, the concept of helping people to understand that, it's not about the more you have, the more you want, the more you have, the more you want. I probably started to think about that, believe it or not, at the start of this business, because I'm saying to myself, you know what, I'm pretty fortunate. If I do this right, that's the number one thing for me. The fact that I'm getting paid for it is the bonus.
Yes.
Because I've always been a believer, even when you work for people or work for organisations, or, whether you're running your own business or you're an employee, if you do the right thing, you perform at your best level, you will get rewarded. One day or another, you will be rewarded for that properly. In my whole entire working life, I have never, ever, ever asked for a pay rise when I was working for people. Ever.
Right.
And yet, I was actually working this out only a few weeks back. I think in total, I got around about 20 to 25 pay increases over my entire life. But I never asked for it.
Yes.
So I kind of am a believer of do the right thing, work to the best of your ability, provide what you need to provide. You're probably going to get rewarded for that.
Right. I'm struggling with people that speak about you need to find your passion, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about, to young people, to people, I don't consider myself young anymore, but, to anybody. If you're stuck, the first thing you just got to do, go find your passion. And that's like, go into the woods and find a little pebble. It's like so difficult to grasp that concept. Now, if you meet someone that is desperately looking for a way to live their life, or a North Star, or a direction, or whatever you want to call it, right? How do you deal with this issue? How do you help people find a path of fulfillment in life again?
I have this conversation with my kids at the moment, but anyone else outside that I speak to, and I often talk to salespeople in the environment that they're in, right? the first thing I say to the people in their environment is, if you don't like what you're doing, get out. And that's a very easy thing to say, right? Because then they sit there and go, well, it's easy for you because, I need a job, I need to pay my bills, I need to do all that sort of stuff. And I say, that's okay. That's a choice that you're making. So I'm not suggesting for a minute that you don't have bills to pay and you probably do need to stay here. So now, is it not a better choice to then say, well, how about I actually develop an attitude that says, whilst I am here, I'm going to do things to the best of my ability? Because I believe that then good follows good, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. In other words, if all of a sudden you're performing at a higher level, then there might be an opening that occurs even within that company that it's like, hey, we might even pay you more because you're performing better, or we might actually get to give you a promotion if we believe that you're performing better. Then all of a sudden someone else might meet you at a function or at a networking function and say, hey, oh, you're the person that's working for such and such. We've heard some good things about you. How about you come and work for us, So doors open when you decide to be positive about what you do. And you might leave that particular organisation and do something else, or you might finally find something that you're passionate about. So let me go back to the passion thing. I recently was talking to a daughter of a friend of mine that owns a coffee shop in Melbourne. And she said to me, I said, how are you going? And she said, look, not that good. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be working here for Dad forever in the coffee shop. I don't want to, I said, well, her name's Steph. And I said, well, Steph, what do you really want to do? She said, I actually really, really want to be involved in TV and production. I said, okay. So tell me who is stopping you from doing that. She said, I said, is Mum and Dad stopping you? No. Is someone else stopping you? No. So why aren't you doing it? Oh, well, I have to do a course and I have to do... I said, I didn't say that I'm going to wave the magic wand and all of a sudden you're in TV and production. You have to work at it. But if this is what you really, really want to do, then why don't you put the steps in place to do it? Guess what? You might have to also work part-time and pay your way and do what you've got to do to get there. But if you really if that's the passion, then why aren't you following that passion? And that's the only thing that I say to people when they say, my passion is this, or I don't know what my passion is. Well, I don't think it's a crime not to have one. So
I completely agree with you.
Okay, so there's my thing there. You might find a passion one day. It might be that here you are at 35 or 40 years of age, and it's like, oh my God, I actually like making cups of coffee, and I'm really, really good at it. I'm going to open up a coffee shop. Great. Well, if that's what you want to do, and you only found that out at the age of 40, no problem. Passion does not just come up in one foul swoop. People either have something of a passion early, mid, late in life. Who knows? But it's not a crime not to have it. My kids at the moment, like even at the age of 19 and 20 and 20, it's like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's like, it's not a crime not to know that right now. But if you really look at yourself and say, what are the things that I just like doing? Just what are the things that I like to do? Well, then focus on those things. And then try and find things that match that particular like. And that maybe that's where your passion is.
Yeah. For me, I really like what you're saying. There's another part to it which you're touching on too. For me, is very important. I think is that talking about a passion doesn't make you passionate.
Yeah, that's that exactly.
So I think if you think something is of interest to you, you should start doing it, and you should start doing what you think you're passionate about. Right? Only by doing it, you'll find out whether it's actually something you like to do it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you like this podcast, I always had in my mind I want to gather stories. I want to speak to people. I want to learn how to interview. Only by doing it, you figure out, do I like this? Do I enjoy this? How can I get better at it? It's also part of your passion, right? Passion is, you're not a perfect soccer player from day one. If you're passionate about it, you like the training. You like the rehearsal. You like the process of getting better at something. That's, I think, where you find the passion, right? If you enjoy the process of getting better at something, that's sort of a good sign of that's something for you. So, yeah, that's it. And I completely, the statement, it's not a crime to not have a passion. I think that's so true. I think you should not worry too much about it and do the things you love.
Yeah, but I like what you just said then as well. If you think you like something, then start doing it. Hey, I thought I liked it, but I don't. Fine. I thought I liked it. No, I actually love it. So go ahead and follow it.
Stop talking about it. Start doing something.
Start doing.
Yeah, agree. I want to take you back to a while back. It's more than half your life back, I think. If you would go back to Serge at 20 years old.
Yeah, yes.
And you go back to that person, right? And you now know what you know now, right? You're here. You're far from the end of your life. I hope you have many, many more years to
Thank
go.
you. So do I.
And you now look back and you look at that guy and you say, wait a minute, I should have known or have done that when I was 20. What would you tell yourself when you were 20? If you would have a chance to say that.
Terrific. Two things. From a monetary perspective, I think I would have started investing in property earlier.
Okay.
That's just by the by. I think I definitely, if I know what I know now, I would have invested in property earlier. So that's the first thing. From a life perspective, the thing that I would tell my 20-year-old self would be, do not worry about things that don't potentially happen. Because that, in effect, kind of led to a story that I'll tell you a little bit about as far as what happened to me during the years of 96 and 97.
Okay.
But I was very much a person that worried about what people thought.
About you?
About me all the time. And that was and it used to really affect me, because I was this outgoing, bubbly kind of guy, and, I liked everybody. That was me. That was my personality, And
high on the eye, on the DISC.
High on the eye. Absolutely. That's exactly right. And it was a real, it was a real concern for me. And so if I go back to my 20-year-old self, I would say, do not worry about what people you just worry about what you can control. And it's something that I teach today to all my people. Control what you can control. And then anything else around you is not your fault. I mean, you can influence, but at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. Okay? Anything that's out of your control is what I used to spend 95% of my time worrying about. And that was my problem back then. So that's what I would tell my 20-year-old self today.
It's tough in that age, yeah?
It's very tough.
It's the age where, you're into meeting girls and into being out in the world and exploring new things, and then not to worry about how you were perceived by others.
Look, and she'd probably hate me saying this, but my youngest daughter, Bridget, is actually going through that very process as we speak. And all I can say to her, and isn't life interesting? You'd like to think that we learn from our mistakes. Well, we might at our age, but it doesn't mean anything to our children, because she's going through that process right now, and I'm saying, don't worry about it. Trust me, I've gone through that. It's okay. Don't worry about stuff. But she still does.
Do you also find that with your kids that if you talk to them from your point of view and your experiences, it's very powerful? So if you, instead of That's what I found out recently.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of telling them, you shouldn't do this, it's better to say, well, I've done this, and it was horrible, or it was a bad result, or, I've been where you were. My kids are 13 and below, so I'm starting to get into trouble with them now. And
it's a good age.
Yeah, it's a good age. And as soon as I start talking from experience, they're there. They're in it with me.
Oh yeah.
And they appreciate it. Oh, this is not, there's some stupid rule that you came up with, but it's like, okay, wait a minute, you've done that. Okay, makes sense.
I might listen to you now.
Now I might listen to you. But it makes us realizing that makes us better parents, I think.
Oh yeah, no, and hopefully I've been able to achieve that with all my kids and say, well, one of my cute lines to them is, you know what, guys, I actually didn't just get dropped on this earth at the age of 40, and it's like, oh, well, here I am. Now I'm telling you what to do. And see, that didn't happen. I actually started here when I was like 0, like I've been here for a while. And but you are right. Speaking to your kids when you've gone through stuff yourself and they can literally relate to that because they're going through something similar is a much more powerful conversation.
In the seminar yesterday, you revealed a little bit about yourself, which struck me. And I've asked your permission to talk about it today. There was a dark period in your life, and you were dealing with anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
I'm not curious about your pain and how difficult it was, but I'm curious about what that has taught you in life. And maybe you can introduce a little bit about what the situation was, and then what you draw out of it. And you were even saying yesterday you might want to write a book about this.
Yeah.
Which I think would be great because I think it would help a lot of people. So could you explain a little bit?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. So when I was involved with my brother Tony in the days of Movieland, it was, like I said, it was back in 1996, and my brother actually, I'll never forget this, came into the office and he said, look, I believe it or not, I think we might have someone who's interested in buying the business. And this wasn't Video Easy at the time, by the way. This was an organisation from the States who were called West Coast Video. And West Coast Video were actually the number 2 video chain and brand next to Blockbuster. Right. So they were pretty keen to buy Movieland. Now, it was an interesting part in my life because at that stage I had actually, whilst I'd been with Movieland for a while, I actually left for a couple of years to actually go and do some work with another organisation. Whilst I was still involved there, I was gone and done a bit of work with another organisation as a national sales manager. Then I came back and worked full-time with my brother Tony. And he told me that there was this potential to sell the business. And that's great, And it was a substantial sale. Like we thought, all our Christmases had come at once. This is amazing, right?
Life's finished. Done.
We're done. Done. We're good. So all of a sudden, over the next couple of days, and maybe the next week or two, I started, physically, little things like I started getting tingly nose and little tingly fingers, and okay, fine. And then this one day, I actually just found it difficult to breathe. I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? So, I kind of went to the doctor and I said, look, this is what's happening. Can you help me out? He goes, I did checks and did all that. He goes, no, you're fine. You help. And mind you, remembering play footy, coach, train, so I was very fit, and thankfully still am today, So, what's going on here? So, again, physically, nothing wrong with me. However, as time went by, it would become a more frequent event. So I would, short of breath, I would, heart palpitations, tingly fingers and nose, because obviously it was just, and it would be debilitating, to the point where, and I'm not sure how many people who will listen to this podcast have seen the movie Analyze This with Robert De Niro. Very funny movie, one of my favourites with Billy Crystal. Well, Robert De Niro plays a mob boss, if you like, or gangster, and he actually in this movie, if you watch it, he suffers from anxiety, right?
Yes.
So there's a scene where here he is in his suit and tie, and has an anxiety attack, and goes home in his suit and tie, lies on his bed, and because his wife says, "What are you doing home?" And lies on his bed in a sort of fetal position, and just needs to lie there. That was me 3 or 4 times a week. So we would be like we are right now, sitting across a table from each other, and let's say we were either having a meeting or a lunch or whatever, and I would actually sense a panic attack coming. And I would then get embarrassed about that, and therefore would make up excuses to leave the meeting. Because I can't be here. I'm about to get a panic attack. And the last thing I want to do is demonstrate that in front of you, So then I just leave and go home. And even the drive home, depending how far away I was at the time, would be a nightmare, because I'd think, am I going to get home? So I'd have to stop at the side of the road and go down on my knees and take deep breaths, and if I could, and it was just debilitating. So I went to my doctor again, and I said, "Look, there's something going on here. What is it?" So my doctor actually said, "Well, I think you're suffering from anxiety." I said, "Okay, what am I anxious about?" I said, life's pretty good. It's not like I'm living on the street. It's not like my wife has left me. It's not like, it's okay, So we actually talked through, well, what's happening in your life at the moment? Tell me what's going on. And I said, there's this, there's that, there's this. Oh, and by the way, we look like we're getting bought out by this company in the States. He goes, "Oh, yeah? Tell me a bit more about that." And then he said to me, "What does that mean for you?" And I said, "I don't know what that means for me." Bingo. We just kind of, at that point in time, looked at each other and said, there's the catalyst of this, because you are now unsure about what you're going to do. Because it's not like I was the majority shareholder in the business. Sure, I would have, made a little bit of money out of it, but I still needed to do something, right, at the time. So we came to the conclusion that was the catalyst of what started the whole anxiety. So it was then a case of, now that we know what's going on, how about we try and help you? And he gave me this book, it was actually a cartoon book called Taming the Monster.
Okay.
And as I was just, reading it, it was only about, 30, 40 pages. That was it, right? But everything that was in there sort of related to what I was kind of going through. But the thing that I learnt about that, and like I said, it lasted for 2 years, like to the point where, I would, let's say, again, using this as the example, if you'd called me and said, "Well, Serge, I'd like to do a podcast with you," I probably would have made up every excuse under the sun to say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do it, I'm busy," or, because I knew that if I did this, I would have a panic attack. But when you really delve into it, that part of it was all because I was concerned about what you would have thought. So here's what got me over the line. When I read the book, the one thing that I learnt about that, and this is what I want to share with everybody, and it's not just about anxiety attacks, it's about anything in life that you're going through. If you share that with people, half your problem is solved instantaneously. So what I found was, I got used to saying, for example, to you, "Hey, Erik, I'm looking forward to doing this. Now, look, I just want to let you know, just every now and again, I might get a little bit anxious. So if I do, and I feel like I need to leave, don't feel, I don't want to feel embarrassed about that, and don't feel offended if that's the case, or just, something that I'm going through at the moment. Well, Erik, the minute that I started saying that to people, and I only had to say that like 3 or 4 times initially, it was almost like the weight of your shoulders, the weight came off your shoulders instantaneously. Because it was like, well, okay, they know now. And subconsciously, I was saying, well, if they know, and funnily enough, I then didn't get any panic attacks anymore.
Was it instantaneously?
Instantaneous. It was amazing. And it was like, so it's almost like you've got all this stuff bottled up in you, as far as, I've got this illness, in inverted commas. I'm telling you, I've got this illness. And all of a sudden, it started to dissipate and dissipate and dissipate. And I was doing some breathing exercises that my doctor gave me, of course, and things like that, which is all great. But that was the key. So the message that I got from that, and the learning I got from that, is if you have a problem, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Get someone to help you. You're not on your own. Other people have gone through this stuff. Other people probably will go through this stuff. So it's a matter of sharing that information, and then all of a sudden, it's an accepted thing. So you might be, we talk about people who are alcoholics and people who are drug dependent and people who are all these, and a lot of other illnesses that people have. Well, you're not Robinson Crusoe. There are millions of people out there that suffer from similar illnesses or other illnesses or whatever the case may be. Then it's like, hey, does everyone have a cup of coffee, or most people have a cup of coffee? Well, that's pretty much the same thing. So share it, and then the minute that you do, you will be liberated, because there's half your battle gone. Still doesn't mean to say that you need to do things to help you get better. But that was the key for me. And that's when I found... And like, I had so many situations. It's like a freight train coming the other way. I'll never forget, I was on a plane from Melbourne to Sydney. It's a 1-hour flight. It felt like it was a 10-hour flight. And then you start to think, oh, well, what about if the plane goes down? And it's all this madness that goes through your head. And I was going to Sydney for a really important function in the video industry. I ended up staying in my room, and I actually had to call a doctor into the room to just give me something to just calm me down, because I couldn't be there. So that was the sort of stuff that was happening to me.
Wow. I really hope you write the book. I want to acknowledge you for your presence. I'm touched. I'm emotional now, so there's something in your story touched me here. And I want to thank you for your presence. I think you're a great storyteller. I've got one last question for you, which I'll ask at the end.
Sure.
And I think I like your captivating spirit. When you talk, people get drawn to you. I get drawn to you, and I hope you keep doing this for a long time. So.
Well, I hope so too.
Yeah. So people might be inspired by the things you said. How would you like people to get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
Look, they certainly can go to my website, and all my contact details are on the website. And more importantly, the website's got a lot of stuff, especially in relation to leverage sales coaching, of course, which is the name of my business. I better say that properly, shouldn't I? Leverage Sales Coaching. Or there you go. That's the name of the business.
And your domain name?
So it's leveragesalescoach.com.au.
Great. And they can find your contact details there. They can reach out to you.
All my contact details are there. Email, mobile, etc. are all there. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. My last question to all of my guests is, could you tell me, what does the word freedom mean to you?
What does the word freedom mean to me? Freedom means that you have the ability to live the life that you want to live. Now, for some people, that might mean that they work, 12-hour days and, they have a family, or they don't have a family, or they live a life of being footloose and fancy free, or they have to report to a boss every single day of their life, or they're their own boss. My thing of freedom is whatever you want that to be is freedom. So in other words, if you don't want to answer to anybody and you think that that's freedom, well then you better go and find something to do that allows you to do that, okay? If freedom for you is, I want the ability to go to work at 9 o'clock, finish at 5 o'clock, get paid for that, go home and be with my family, that's freedom, then go and do that, okay? So freedom to me right now is the ability to be able to do what I love to do. And as I said earlier on in this podcast, I start at 8, finish at 6, I shut down, I go home to my family. The ability to do that with this business that I now have allows me freedom. And it's not necessarily the fact that I don't have to work anymore. One last thing that I'll finish off with. My wife says to me, and a lot of people ask me, when are you going to retire? My answer, I have no idea. Because I don't have a retirement, date in my mind. If I'm still doing this at the age of 80, great, as far as I'm concerned.
Serge Romano, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you very much, Erik.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurs Organization Indonesia podcast. For more information about the Entrepreneurs Organization, go to eonetwork.org. And for show notes to this episode and all past and future episodes, go to eopodcast.org.